The Empire Strikes Back is the darkest chapter in the original Star Wars trilogy, a sequel that dared to let the villains win. But even after more than 4 decades, this film is still hiding secrets. Did you know that 2 different versions of the ending played in theaters at the same time? Or that Darth Vader was originally written living in a Gothic castle, feeding pet gargoyles from a golden bowl? Today, we're uncovering 15 hidden truths about The Empire Strikes Back 1980, including shocking Easter eggs that reveal secret connections to The Shining. Number 1. This ending was never supposed to exist. The final scene of The Empire Strikes Back, where Luke, Leia, and the droids regroup in a medical bay while Lando flies off to rescue Han, feels like the natural conclusion to the story. But that scene wasn't part of the original film. It was shot 4 months after principal photography wrapped. Mark Hamill, who plays Luke Skywalker, confirmed this in 2022, calling it an added scene, not a reshoot. Without it, the film simply ended with the Millennium Falcon rescuing Luke from beneath Cloud City and escaping into space. No regrouping, no plan to save Han, no prosthetic hand, just total defeat. The studio worried the ending was too bleak, so they brought the cast back to film one final moment of hope. But even that wasn't the end of it. When Empire opened in about 100 theaters, George Lucas watched with audiences and realized the ending was still geographically confusing. Viewers couldn't tell that Luke was on a separate ship from Lando. So while the film was already in theaters, Lucas called ILM and ordered 3 new establishing shots. The first shot is the medical frigate sitting stationary in space. The second shot is the Millennium Falcon approaching it. And finally, the third is the Falcon flying away from it. They had 3 weeks to deliver them before the wider release. The very first audiences saw a different ending than everyone who came after. Number 2. Hidden objects in the asteroid field. During the Millennium Falcon's escape through the asteroid field, the effects artists at Industrial Light and Magic built dozens of miniature asteroids to hurl past the camera. Every single one was a physical object. But hidden among them are 2 things that have no business being in deep space. One asteroid is actually a potato. Another is a tennis shoe. The ILM crew slipped them in as a practical joke, knowing they would fly past too fast for anyone to notice. And for years, nobody did. It wasn't until fans began freeze-framing the sequence on home video that the gag was discovered, and ILM staff later confirmed it in interviews. In the age before CGI, the team that built an entire asteroid field by hand decided to leave their signature inside it. Number 3. The Shining burned down Empire's sets. Before cameras even rolled at Elstree Studios in England, disaster struck. In January 1979, a fire broke out on Stage 3, where director Stanley Kubrick was filming The Shining. The blaze destroyed the stage completely, and the ripple effect hit the production process of Empire Strikes Back very hard. The production had been allocated 11 stages, but was forced to give up 2 to Stanley Kubrick so they could continue filming. That meant 64 sets for The Empire Strikes Back had to be squeezed across just 9 remaining stages, and the entire shooting schedule had to be rebuilt from scratch. 2 of cinema's most ambitious productions were colliding in the same building at the same time, and The Shining's disaster nearly derailed the Star Wars sequel before a single frame was shot. Number 4. Vader's castle and his pet gargoyles. Before screenwriter Lawrence Kasdan came aboard, the first draft of the sequel was written by Leigh Brackett, a legendary Hollywood writer known for The Big Sleep and Rio Bravo. George Lucas hired her specifically for her expertise in pulpy adventure. In her version of the story, Darth Vader barely leaves his home. Instead of chasing the Millennium Falcon across the galaxy, he spends most of the film inside a Gothic castle described as black iron squatting on a rock in the midst of a crimson sea. There, Vader feeds winged pet gargoyles from a golden bowl and uses Force telepathy to try to lure Luke to the dark side from across the galaxy. The concept artist Ralph McQuarrie even painted the castle, but it was shelved when Lucas rewrote the script. Then, 36 years later, director Gareth Edwards resurrected the original artwork for Rogue One, turning it into Vader's fortress on Mustafar. An idea from 1978 finally made it to the screen in 2016. Number 5. This bounty hunter was built from leftovers. When Darth Vader summons a lineup of bounty hunters aboard his Star Destroyer, one of the most striking figures is IG-88, a towering assassin droid with a distinctive cylindrical head. That head wasn't custom-built for this film. It was actually a beverage dispenser recycled from the Mos Eisley cantina scene in A New Hope. In a franchise spending tens of millions of dollars, one of its most recognizable background characters was assembled from leftover bar equipment. And IG-88's story doesn't end on Vader's bridge. Later in the film, if you look carefully at the junk piles in Cloud City's industrial area on Bespin, you can spot IG-88's scrapped body among the debris. Since all the bounty hunters were competing against each other to capture the Millennium Falcon's crew, it's entirely possible that Boba Fett had already eliminated IG-88 before Han Solo and the others ever set foot in Cloud City. Number 6. The twist that didn't exist yet. In Lee Brackett's first draft, the most famous twist in cinema history was nowhere to be found. Darth Vader was not Luke Skywalker's father. Instead, Luke's real father, Anakin Skywalker, appeared as a Force ghost on Dagobah alongside Obi-Wan Kenobi. Anakin was a separate heroic figure who explained that he had sent Luke away for his own protection when the Empire closed in. In this version of the story, Vader and Anakin were two completely different people. The revelation that changed everything didn't enter the script until Lucas rewrote the second draft himself in March 1978. Brackett never saw it. She had died of cancer just weeks after turning in her draft, at the age of 62. Number 7. The puppet that risked everything. Before Yoda became one of cinema's most beloved characters, nobody knew how to bring him to life. The production considered stop-motion animation, a marionette, and even putting a monkey in a costume, because it was the right height. None of those ideas worked. Lucas then called Jim Henson, the creator of the Muppets, and asked him to perform the character. Henson was too busy, but he recommended Frank Oz, the puppeteer behind Miss Piggy, Cookie Monster, and Grover. Makeup artist Stuart Freeborn sculpted the puppet, blending his own facial features with Albert Einstein's, hoping Einstein's look would make the character feel intelligent. But it was Oz who made Yoda feel alive. The Dagobah set was built on a raised platform so Oz could work from underneath, and Kirshner treated the puppet like a real actor, speaking directly to it instead of addressing Oz down below. Lucas later admitted the entire film depended on this gamble. If that puppet had come across as a silly Muppet instead of a living being, the movie would have collapsed under its own weight. Number 8. Their contracts already predicted the future. When Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher signed on for Star Wars in 1977, most people assumed they were locked in only for 3 films. But author J.W. Rinsler, who spent years researching the definitive making of books for the franchise, uncovered something buried inside those original contracts. Both actors weren't just signed for 3 films. Their contract covered 4 films. In other words, George Lucas quietly left the door open for one additional sequel beyond the trilogy, all the way back in 1977. That contractual provision sat dormant for 35 years until Disney purchased Lucasfilm and brought both actors back for The Force Awakens in 2015. A contract clause buried in the late 1970s quietly predicted what would happen decades later. Number 9. Lucas bet everything he owned. George Lucas self-financed The Empire Strikes Back because he refused to let 20th Century Fox control creative decisions. The original budget was $8 million. By the time filming wrapped, the cost had ballooned to over $30 million, nearly 4 times the original figure. The production took 175 shooting days, almost double the 100 that were planned. Lucas had to borrow $10 million to finish the film, putting his home and future Star Wars earnings on the line. There is a golden rule in Hollywood: never use your own money. Lucas broke it deliberately because he wanted complete authority over the sequel. If this movie had flopped, he would have lost everything. Luckily, it earned over $400 million worldwide. Number 10. The Falcon was talking to someone. During the asteroid field sequence, C-3PO, the Golden Protocol droid, fluent in over 6 million forms of communication, tries to talk to the Millennium Falcon's onboard computer. He tells Han the ship has the most peculiar dialect. For nearly 4 decades, that was just a charming throwaway joke. Then in 2018, Solo: A Star Wars Story revealed something that reframes the line entirely. In that film, Lando Calrissian's co-pilot, an outspoken droid named L337, uploads her consciousness into the Falcon's navigation system during a crisis. C-3PO wasn't struggling to communicate with a computer. He was trying to talk to a person. Whether the connection was planned all along or a brilliant piece of retroactive storytelling, it turns one of Empire's funniest moments into something surprisingly poignant. Number 11. Carbonite was an insurance policy. Harrison Ford was the only lead cast member who hadn't committed to returning for a third film. Unlike Hamill and Fisher, who were locked in through multiple sequels, Ford had no contractual obligation to come back. Lucas needed a contingency plan. If Ford walked away, Han Solo could remain frozen in Carbonite forever. His storyline left permanently unresolved. The decision to freeze Han wasn't just a dramatic masterstroke. It was a practical escape hatch. The Carbonite served 2 purposes at once. It created one of the most devastating cliffhangers in film history, and it quietly protected Lucas from an actor who might never return. Number 12. Han Solo was supposed to die. Gary Kurtz, who produced both A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back, had a very different vision for how the trilogy should end in Return of the Jedi. In a 2010 interview with the Los Angeles Times, Kurtz revealed the original outline he and Lucas had planned for Return of the Jedi. Han Solo would be rescued from Jabba the Hutt early in the film, then killed during a raid on an Imperial base midway through. Leia would be left alone, struggling with her duties as queen of her people, leading a rebel alliance in tatters, and Luke would walk off into the sunset by himself, like Clint Eastwood at the end of a spaghetti western. No Ewoks, no second Death Star, no celebration. Lucas changed everything. Kurtz said the reason was blunt. By that time, there were really big toy sales, and that was a factor. The 2 men split over the direction of the franchise. Mark Hamill reportedly said, "It felt like mom and dad getting a divorce." Number 13. Yoda was almost named Buffy. Before he got his name, the Jedi Master went through some unusual alternatives. In Brackett's first draft, he was called Minch. But in Lucas's even earlier story outlines, the character had a very different name. Lucas called him Buffy. His handwritten notes describe the character as very old, 3,000 or 4,000 years, with a philosophy of feel, not think. The name Yoda didn't appear until the later drafts written by Lucas and Kasdan. It is one of the narrowest escapes in franchise history. If that early name had survived, generations of fans would have taken their deepest life lessons from a 900-year-old Jedi Master named Buffy. Number 14. Wampas nearly invaded the Rebel base. In the finished film, a Wampa attacks Luke in the opening minutes and then disappears from the story, but originally the creatures played a much larger role. An entire deleted subplot showed Wampas breaking through the snow walls of Echo Base and attacking Rebel soldiers. The Rebels managed to capture several of them and seal them inside a storage room. Then, during the Imperial assault, C-3PO rips a warning sign off the door, and a squad of unsuspecting stormtroopers walk straight into the Wampa pen. Parts of this subplot made it into the comic book adaptation, the radio drama, and even the original theatrical trailer, which included the shot of C-3PO removing the sign. The footage was cut because the Wampa costumes looked unconvincing on camera. Rough versions finally surfaced decades later on the 2011 Blu-ray set. Number 15. Filming in the worst storm in decades. The exterior Hoth scenes were filmed at Finst, Norway, on the Hardanger-Jökullon Glacier, one of the most remote and hostile locations ever used for a major production. The crew arrived in March 1979, and walked into the worst snowstorm the area had seen in half a century. Temperatures plunged to -38 degrees Fahrenheit. Film became brittle and snapped inside the cameras, lenses iced over. Effects paint froze solid in its cans. Then 2 avalanches collapsed the snow tunnels connecting the crew to the nearest railway line, stranding everyone at their hotel for days. Hamill's big scene of Luke collapsing in the blizzard was supposed to be filmed 90 minutes away on a glacier, but the weather made travel impossible. They ended up shooting at 30 feet from the hotel. Ford, who wasn't even scheduled to be in Norway, was flown in at the last minute because of production delays. He traveled the final 23 miles by snowplow. The Empire Strikes Back was born from chaos. Fires, avalanches, ballooning budgets, and a filmmaker betting his home on a story where the heroes lose, and somehow all of that pressure forged the greatest sequel ever made. Here's a question for you. If you had been in that first 70mm audience in 1980, watching the original ending with no medical bay scene, just the heroes flying into the void in total defeat, would you have come back 3 years later for the next one? Tell us in the comments. And if this video showed you something new about a film you've loved for decades, hit subscribe so you don't miss what we uncover next. Thank you for watching.